good to see you again. I'm a social worker, so long line of social workers.
Yes.
And I'm going to concur with everything that I've heard. Raise a few different issues. One is what I see as the institutional neglect going on in the schools that needs to be fixed. So one of the things I raised with the council last time I was here was about the lead issue, that they did measurements in 2004, 2003, and then a whole other series, 2009, 10, and 11, and then never fixed any of the issues other than to turn off faucets, which continue to be off. And they also didn't test all of the water taps in each building, so they only turned off the ones which they had identified, but they haven't fully identified all of them, and they're also using an action level that is really out of date. The other piece is that I do not like the word streamline, because I think streamline often means railroad, and there's something coming up. I know I've talked to you briefly about it before. You've certainly heard about parents who are concerned about cell towers on schools, which I continue to be concerned about, and haven't heard back yet, actually, from your office when I was trying to get information on zoning related to that, because I believe it's against the zoning rules, the way they're putting them up now. But that is the issue of 5G. So I was looking at your paperwork, and I didn't see anything about telecommunications. So I don't know if you know that what they're trying to roll out now with the new Internet of Things is literally thousands of antennas in every city. Right in front of our homes, there's small cells. They're going to be having different frequencies and modulations of non-ionizing radiation. And I was just at a conference in Israel with some of the top scientists in the country, and heard some physicists presenting on how the higher frequencies which they're using, because they're using up the lower bands and now they're moving to the higher ones, interact with our skin. They interact with our skin, the largest organ in our body. Our skin, actually, this is kind of wild to think about, becomes a helical antenna. And there's no safety testing being done about how that is going to affect our bodies over time. Now, I've talked to you before about cell tower radiation, which is using lower frequencies right now. But research continues to show evidence that long-term exposure is harmful, as the new NIH study, $25 million study on rats exposed for 2 years, has shown. And I'd like to add one more thing, which I have raised and I believe needs political will. All of this needs political will to do the right thing. The Governor's Advisory Council on Children's Environment and Health Protection, which is made up of 19, half appointed by the governor, actually, in the state of Maryland, just issued recommendations on school networks. They recommend wires, not Wi-Fi. So they recommend that because cell phone and wireless radiation, it penetrates our bodies. The levels that our government has set is not set at a level that protects us from long-term effects.
Okay. Let me do this, and I apologize if we didn't get back to you on the zoning issue. I believe it's allowed by zoning. It depends on where it is. The second part of that is obviously with respect to some of the cell phone towers that are going up. Not the ones that I know some people, including yourself, had concern about, are on school property. So that primarily is going to be a school board related issue. I see Mr. Blocker's here, I'm sure. I don't know if they've had anybody approach them with respect to that particular issue.
The school board?
Cell towers and the agreement. Okay, so you have a representative, even though he's the student representative, he's still a representative of the school board here as well, so feel free to speak to him about that.
With the 5G, they're streaming.
That one, I'll be honest with you, I'm not familiar with as much, so if you can get me some of the information or copies of the report.
I can. In Montgomery County, what they're doing is they're trying to write the zoning so that the municipalities have the most ability to make decisions for themselves, rather than the federal government just saying that the right-of-way is allowed to be used in any which way. Okay. Because it's every 10 homes they'll be putting up transmitters.
And on your first point was about lead in the water at schools. I know there has been testing done. as part of that. Maybe, Mr. Blocker, I don't know if you're familiar with that issue as well, not to pass it, but I know because there have been issues in other schools, obviously, within the district as part of that. So if there's a particular school, can you just let me know, and then we can have either the school system or WSSC, if it's on WSSC, come in and do part of the testing?
I've been writing the school system repeatedly. I did a whole year of public information requests, and there are 88 schools.
Okay.
And I actually don't have full answers. Maybe my school board member can help me with some of that, because I asked some very, what I think
Specific
are
questions.
basic questions. And I'm not going to talk about everything here except to say that I have thousands of papers of documents from the school system on this, and what happened was the ball was dropped.
Okay.
Now, I believe that some parents in Phyllis Williams are now, and another school, have taken some action trying to fix this situation, but it requires the policymakers to pay attention to it and say, this is important. This is what we need to do, and it needs to happen. And then I talked to another parent who told me that they've got in Roosevelt, that there are schools that are cordoned off. Another teacher who told me that there's plastic on top of fountains that are closed. That's unacceptable.
Okay.
That
Thank you.
needs to be fixed.
All right. I appreciate it, and thank you for coming out.
Think
again.
that political leaders, speak the truth and speak up, even if, it's like something I've heard from, I don't know if it was from your office or another office, was just saying, well, that's not my jurisdiction necessarily. But when it came to the zoning for the cell towers, as I understand it, in a residential zone, if there is, according to what I read, unless you were saying that actually it does meet zoning, the problem is that we have no say in the process.
It depends on where it is.
But if it's in a residential zone,
That-
the
that
people
we'd have to
have
take a look at
no
the
process. We are being told that it's only after it's up that then they'll notice how many vehicles are driving up. We know there are going to be more than 4 or 5 times. So I sent you all this in an email. So in residential zones, or they're being allowed to go up without any special exception process. The people have no say
Okay.
in whether these towers are going up or not.
So let me
So
address
do you-
that a little
yeah.
bit, and I don't know this, this particular issue. It hasn't come before me before, but the Board of Education is a state entity. They're not subject to the zoning ordinance. They're governed by the state of Maryland. So state agencies and the federal government are not governed under the local governing zoning ordinance.
But in Princeton, at least in Montgomery County, the people, there's a special exception process that it moves through. You're saying that because the Board of Education owns the land, that
possible.
that the people have no say on what goes on
The Board of
even though we
Education is a
pay
state
taxes?
entity, and the state is exempt from local zoning.
So then what is it zoned?
So the zoning doesn't apply to the state.
So no
It doesn't
zoning
apply to the
applies.
federal government.
So if we have a federal facility,
No, I understand what
Okay.
you're telling me.
Right.
I'm just like, that's really interesting. So we could put anything we wanted on a school. It doesn't need to meet any zoning requirements. That's how we can put 3 cell towers per school, which is what the master lease says.
right.
That's what you're saying. And even though they voted and there were no people there
Right.
to say anything, and it was 3 minutes, and nobody even knew what they were voting on because we couldn't even see the master lease. The public never saw it. You're saying that it doesn't matter.
I'd be curious if you have access to the Montgomery County legislation, maybe that's something we can consider as part, but there is an issue of whether or not local zoning does not apply to federal government facilities, right? They don't have to go through our process as part of their development of their own land.
So school could put up whatever they wanted. They could put up big signs. They could turn into a mall. It doesn't matter, I guess. That's what you're telling me.
So the state government governs state, development. Yeah, just like
So
the
are
federal
there-
government
so that means that
does the
but
same thing.
If the state government, then what's the zoning? There's no zoning, is what you're telling me. The state can do.
Well,
Is that what you're saying?
it depends. Like we've had this discussion on the zoning rewrite about what you call right now it's called open space zone, right?
Uh-huh.
We might be changing the name. We're having that discussion right now. What does that mean? For most people, that means this is public land. It's supposed to be open space and not supposed to be any development. That's not really true. you can do development in what we call open space or OS zones as part of that. It's limited, but you can do that. So the question for me, yes, do we locally zone a school for a particular zone? I'm sure all the schools are within a particular zone. There might be an OS zone, a RE zone, depending on where they are. The question then becomes, and this is what we'd have to look into, because if it's controlled by the Board of Education, they are a state agency. Yeah, they're created by state law. That's what it is. Even though there's processes they have with the county, we as the county council, except for those limited purposes for our budget, we can't tell the school system what to do with their property. We can't dictate to them what they can do or not do on their property because we don't own the property. Yep. So, and we'll try to clarify that.
Yeah, I'd like to see exactly
okay.
how that works.
Okay.
You could send me that.
All right, Bill, you got the last question? We got about 30 seconds left.